Welcome to the Becoming babyREADY podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Welcome. I'm excited today to be speaking with Troy, who co-parents 4 children with his ex-husband, 3 of whom were born with the help of surrogates. Listen in today and find out more about their parenting journey. I want to take a moment and just welcome Troy to join us today to talk about the members of his family. So Troy, tell us who you are and about your family.
Yeah, so my name is Troy. I am lucky enough that I have 4 beautiful children. My oldest is 19. Her name is Brooke. I know she's grown up very quickly. My middle daughter is 13, named Bella. And then Saxon is 12. And then Soren is 7.
Wow, they are growing up so fast, right? Like in a blink of an eye, our kids grow up, right?
It's true. It's too fast sometimes.
It's so true.
Especially for the girls. I don't know. They grow up faster than I wanted them to.
Well, and it feels like they kind of are children, and then they wake up one Saturday morning and they look at you and all of a sudden they're teens and tweens and growing up, and you're thinking, but no, I put a little girl to bed last night.
It's true. My youngest son, who's 7, I joke with him all the time. I'm like, where's all your baby fat? I loved your baby fat. And he has none left.
Nope. It goes. Of the various methods of growing your family that were available to you, which was the path you took?
Well, we actually took a couple, so it's unique. My ex-husband, when I first met him, which would have been 17 years ago, he had a daughter already, our oldest daughter, Brooke. And, I remember when I came out as gay, my first thing my mother said to me was, "Oh, but you always wanted to be a dad." And so really for a long time, didn't think it was very possible. And then when I met Mark, he had Brooke with a lesbian couple, and they were co-parenting. And, it was obviously he was wonderful, but also that was a real draw that, I didn't see a lot of role models or people that actually had been successful in the gay and lesbian communities, particularly in creating a family. And so, it was great. And, became her father, I guess when she's probably about 3. We had a conversation one day and she said, "Are you going to be my dad?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to be. Do you want me to be?" And she's like, yeah, you can be my dad. And so that was wonderful. And, also, when you share a child, I imagine it's very similar to a divorced model. It's very difficult, and there's emotions and decision makers. And when you put 3 people into the combination, it even becomes a little bit more difficult. And so we knew that although we loved Brooke and loved, the way that we had her, that wasn't going to be a go forward strategy for us. And it would be something that we would do differently. And so we were very lucky with Bella, to look at surrogacy. It was also something at that time that, again, we didn't know anybody who had been through surrogacy, and we wanted to find a number of things. Mark's a lawyer in Canada, and so wanted to find something that was maybe more legal, because at the time, surrogacy wasn't legal. And we also found out that in California, it was the only state in North America at that time where you could actually put both parents' names, both fathers, on the birth certificate at birth. And so that was something for us that was really very powerful, and also something that we really desired and wanted. And so we started the journey in the US, which was great, but it also led to a number of other challenges, just financially. And also when you don't live in the country where your child is being, built, you miss a lot of things. You miss the doctor's appointments, you miss other opportunities maybe for decisions to be made and those type of things. And so that was really hard for us. And we had some challenges with the surrogate. Communication was a challenge with us. And so, those are things that sometimes when you sit down in person, you can have those conversations and they're quite easy. When you don't have that, it's really difficult. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for misconceptions. And so that was kind of what happened for us. And we decided that for our next child, which was Saxon, we didn't want to do that. We felt like we wanted to have the avenue of working in Canada. and found a wonderful surrogate actually in Toronto
Mm.
who was exceptionally wonderful. And we had a great experience with her because we were able to go to all the like appointments, and she really wanted to have the child naturally through a doula and a midwife, and so that was a really great experience to go through. And actually, she was supposed to have our next child with us as well, Soren, but she had met somebody new at that point. And I guess it's not very sexy to be pregnant with somebody else's baby when you're first meeting or first dating. And so, she opted out of our process. And so we really wanted to work with somebody else in Canada. And the agency had set us up and said, listen, there's somebody really great. She had a tough experience, her first surrogacy, but I think you guys would be a great match. And so we had Soren in Halifax.
Wow. And so you jumped into parenthood and then never looked back. It's just so fantastic.
In fact, we tried a lot more times than the number of children that we have. We went through some tough surrogacies where obviously they were not successful. When we did the egg donation the second time, we had 21 A-class embryos, and which is like the 649 of embryos. And so one of the things that I was really passionate about was I wanted to use them all. And, I didn't know how many children we were going to have, but we had 3 pregnancies in between Sax and Soren, and then 2 after. But really, definitely wanted to have a larger family. And honestly, if they had all worked, I probably would have many more children.
Troy's team over here.
And Bella and Saxon are my middle ones. They're only 16 months apart. And so, wow, they're really quite close. And so you could see that we were trying kind of in a quite quick space to have as many children as possible.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So given that achieving parenthood for members of the 2S LGBTQIA community is not easy and it's never free, would you be comfortable giving an estimate as to the total cost you incurred as a family to have a baby?
Yeah, so the first surrogacy was exceptionally expensive because we had some very specific things we were looking for in terms of where we wanted the baby born and other things. That was actually, and then we had some problems at the delivery. We assumed when we bought the insurance that would cover, everything that happened. The surrogate got preeclampsia, and so Bella was born 6 weeks early and was in the NICU for 4 weeks, and none of that was covered. Wow. It just wasn't part of the medical that we had purchased. And so she was north of $200,000. Yeah, it was exceptionally expensive and wasn't, none of them were decisions that we could negotiate on or try to find something. There's things that happen. And I think, so in the US, the insurance that we purchased was just actually for the delivery only. And so any complications around that would have been additional. In Canada, both of our surrogacies were again, 2 different prices. One, I think the ballpark, you go between 40,000 is what you think, and you're probably in the 60,000 afterwards. It always depends though too. One of our surrogates got quite sick during her pregnancy, and so needed some additional things, also needed not to be able to work. And so you have this, number that you have in your head that you think you're going to pay, but it's like any pregnancy, things happen, people don't feel a certain way. And, so I always tell people to plan at least 50% more than you think you're going to, and make sure you have that money to cover it. Because if you don't, and these things come up, I don't know what you would do.
So are there words of caution that you would share with the 2S LGBTQI community as a result of the experiences you've had? I mean, you've said you would tell them to budget for at least 50% more than they initially think. Is there other stuff that you would say to them?
Yeah, I think so. I obviously, talked and mentored a lot of people. What's so wonderful now is the community, there's so many children. When Brooke was in school, she was the only child that had 2 moms and 2 dads, but also the only child that either had 2 moms or 2 dads. So there wasn't anyone. Bella, who is 6 years different, in her grade 1 class, she was one of 3 girls that had 2 dads. And so just generationally, it really changed in that time. I do think, though, a lot of people, believe that the surrogacy is going to be a little bit like Mary Poppins, and that, this is going to be this wonderful experience, and, that we're going to an agency and we're hand selecting someone. And I think that, the advice I would give is to really make sure up front that you understand the life of the surrogate, how she lives her life, what's important to her, and a little bit why she's doing it. I think very often people that are doing this, there's some financial impact that they're able to make for their family, and in many cases change the life of their family, or the trajectory to go back to school or to be able to move into a new home. And all of the things are really important. And I think very often people assume that this is a very altruistic, they're only doing it because they want to help you have a baby. And so it's really important to know the motivation of the surrogate you have, and to be really open too, as you're going through the surrogacy, that not everything is going to go well. It's just like a couple, you fight sometimes, and to have a third party, I think, is really important. So whether that be an agency that you work with, we just found that was really, really important, because I've personally never had a baby, so I don't know all of the emotions and feelings that are going to happen. And having somebody who could say, you know what, Troy, like, just, you need to back off for a couple of days, or, this is how she might be feeling, was just really helpful for us. And so I would share, having an experienced organization that you work for is also really important. It just really helped us. And we had a great relationship with both the agency and the surrogates as well. And so that was kind of the really important key. I think people often go into this with this feeling that, like, the relationship with the agency is really important, but maybe the surrogate, they want a different level of interest. So you also need to find out what the surrogate wants from you. It is a two-way street. They may want you at the appointments. They may want you to be very engaged. And then the final thing is, like, what happens after the baby is born? That is a really important conversation to have. Our surrogate with Bella, we don't speak to her anymore. She is in the US, and we didn't end in a great place. With Saxon, we see his surrogate all the time, and she comes over and now has 2 kids around the same age as our boy. So that's perfect. And our last surrogate, it was one that, like, it was interesting. At the hospital, when Soren was born, we had to go sign some documents. And the hospital, I guess, had some experiences. They really tried to separate us on 2 different floors. And that's just not the way that we were. And so when we went to this appointment, we left our baby with her. And the hospital was like, oh, well, you shouldn't do that. You should let her, like, separate from the baby. And I think what's really important too, in our last 2 surrogacies, I let the surrogate take the baby for a day and just go see everybody in their life that they saw when they were pregnant.
Right.
It's equally important for them to have the opportunity to say, this is the baby I was carrying for this family the entire time, versus, like, today I'm pregnant, now I'm not.
Right.
And I know a number of people had different opinions on that, but I'm like, listen, she carried our baby for 9 or 10 months. Like, she's going to bring him back. I promise you.
Yeah.
And that was really a great way to help. Just also the emotion that could be there of having a baby one day and then not having one to care for after that.
Yeah. No, I hadn't even thought of that, but that is it's a really powerful gift that you gave her in being able to do that. And I think that people could learn a lot from that, because it does give the closure. And I would assume that then it would help open the door to maintaining some kind of communication. If they want to know how the baby's doing, then they don't feel like you cut them off. You respected them and where they were after they birthed your child. So they may be open to, hearing about and wanting to know about how this child's doing in their life. Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back.
Cuddle your baby in comfort in Moon Mama postpartum underwear, designed to not only keep you comfy, but also feel special. Each pair is hand-dyed, making them unique, just like the person wearing them. Visit us at heymoonmama.com and use code SAMLEESON for 15% off your purchase. That's SAMLEEESON. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at Hey Moon Mama. Stay comfy.
And for both the boys, we always send pictures to both of the surrogates. Our last surrogate, within a couple of summers, she's come to visit us at our house with her kids. Because the other piece, and you would in a surrogacy, is sometimes they have kids already. And so there's also needs to be a level of closure or conversation with those children. Children understand things at different ages differently. And so to see your mother pregnant for 9 or 10 months and then all of a sudden not to be, we just felt it was really, really important to be able to do that for both of them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So because you've been there, done that, in a world that we are And yes, it has evolved, it has grown as you've described, but there are still many parts of it that have not grown and evolved. Throughout your processes, were you ever made to feel the other?
Yeah, one in particular, one of the clinics we went to, it was the first clinic we came to when we were in Toronto, and it was interesting. In the US, it felt a little bit more like a transaction, a little bit like they understood the process, and you were a number, you got in line, you were connected with a surrogate, and that was done. In Canada, it didn't feel like that. And very honestly, the first place you went to, I don't felt like they wanted to work with us. And we weren't their typical customer, and I don't think that they knew even really how to deal with us at all. And so, I was always following up and like, what am I missing? And what I realized when we connected with the agency was, this is my own thought, that it wasn't me, it was them. Mm-hmm. And so I actually went down in downtown Toronto. There is a Maple Leaf Medical, and they had somebody there called Dr. Mona Luffy. And she really helped a lot of women through surrogacy. And so she knew the LGBTQI community and knew what places to go. And it was so helpful for me. There's nothing better than going to a doctor that you feel understands where you're coming from and what your hesitations might be, what your fears are. And she really helped kind of marshal our care in that space. And she didn't have to do a lot of things for us, but just the places to go where I could walk in and feel comfortable really made a world of difference for us.
Because it's supposed to be a positive and fun and pleasurable experience in your life, and then to feel like that's not how it's supposed to be. So I love that you.
Yeah, and then also when you're going to a lot of the clinics, it's really tough because you're sitting in a room with a lot of people who typically have fertility issues. Otherwise, they usually wouldn't be there, and the emotion in the room, you can just feel it. And you can feel when somebody comes out of an appointment, if they're disappointed and happy or sad. And, you want to, people just talk it's very interesting for me. People just were all talking about their fertility issues very openly. And you're also like, that's not our issue. And so how do you listen and align and feel like I can hear you? And sometimes I felt like in the other places, they were looking at us like, oh my God, there's two guys here and I can't have my own baby. Like, why are they here? Mm-hmm. And so being in the right place and then having that kind of, I guess, wits about you a little bit was really helpful for me.
Yeah, it would be. Without bias, because you've agreed to participate in this event. So do you feel that having had access to a show like this, where you could hear other people's stories, would have been beneficial to you when you were going through your process and looking for how you would grow your family?
Oh, absolutely. For the agency that we used, I've been a reference for them like so many times, because if you've never been through it before and you don't know anybody maybe in your community that you're comfortable speaking to, you just really don't know. And what I find for myself also is like, if I'm not comfortable in a space, I'm not asking the right questions. I'm insecure in the questions that I ask. I'm afraid of being judged. Mm-hmm. And I really think that like, it's important for you to have role models in anything that you do, but also someone who can just tell you like, this went really badly for us, and let me tell you about why it went badly. And so trying to avoid that. This went exceptionally well for us, and you should try and do that again. But there was nothing for me when we went through it. We didn't have anybody that we knew. We had known gay couples who one of them was married previously, and so had children in that space, mm-hmm. and then they were together. But I didn't know any other people that, as a gay couple, had actually created a child together. And so I think it's incredibly important to share the stories the experience that I had. But also I would have loved to have had that, because even people in my family really didn't understand what I was doing or why I was doing it. And that, not on purpose, but then as a result of that, they weren't maybe necessarily as supportive mm-hmm. as I would have loved them or needed them to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't even, I think about putting this together for members of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community so that they feel that they have a network of support. But you raise an interesting point that they can invite their families to participate in this event as well and see why this is important to us, because our families don't happen by accident. Our families happen purely and 150% through intention. And so, why is this important to us? So you raise an excellent point. Thank you.
And also, especially for my parents of their generation, like there wasn't surrogacy back then, or if it was something they didn't live in their circle of community. And so they had all of these concerns that when you're going through this, you don't need somebody like continuing to make you more worried than you already are. You need somebody to help ground you and say, it's going to be okay, and let me help you. And unfortunately, when people don't know about things, they just tend to like not be very supportive and helpful to you. And it's a very stressful process to go through. And I say, when you're at the clinics are like really hard to be at sometimes, because there's so many people that are trying to like, expand their family. And you almost feel like bad sometimes when you're successful, because you can see in the room that so many people want to be you at that moment. And so I just would have loved to have had that when I was having my children. It would have been amazing.
So we're going to end this on a positive note. Any last words of wisdom or tidbits about how much you love parenthood that you want to share with those who would love to have a family of their own someday?
Yeah, it's such a great time in the world today to be an LGBTQI parent. I think that, just the generation of children that are growing up, like my kids have never, ever had an issue. Brooke, who's 19, often was like bullied, or her friends made fun of her because that wasn't kind of anything that they had seen before. My 3 youngest kids are exceptionally proud, well-spoken, but also they're able to navigate a world that I wish I would have been able to do at their age. And so, the beauty of having more of them in the world today, I think it really helps kind of build some potential, or break down some potential stereotypes that people might have. Like when they meet one of my kids and they're very well adjusted, and they've got 2 dads, and all of those things were just really important for us to give to them. But also I feel like, and this might just be the situation we're in, I feel like they're much more educated on just the world today, just topics and things that are important. They know a little bit about politics and who's not supportive of the community and who is. And like, these are just never things that I would have thought about.
No.
And then the last thing for me is, if you're going through this journey, you've got to make sure that you're in a place where you have the money to back it up, because you never know what's going to happen. You don't know what the outcome would be. And then 2, you have a really good lawyer as well. There is some legal stuff that happens that is, I don't know it. My ex was a lawyer, so he was able to do that. But you want to make sure that you have a signed parenting agreement and all of this stuff, declaration of parenting, and all of that is kind of lined up before the child's born. And then finally, just make sure that you are working with somebody that you're like, I can do this. This feels good. Because that relationship, will get tested and tried. And if it doesn't go well, whatever you're feeling up front, and I think this would happen for our first surrogate, I was just so excited to do it. Like, I probably would have done it with anyone. And
right.
There was things that came up during the surrogacy that I was like, oh, I probably knew this at the very beginning, but was just so desperate, I guess, to move forward, that I maybe oversaw or didn't look for things in the way that I should have.
No, well, that makes perfect sense. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, and for letting the world know more about your story, so that you can help provide them with the insight that they will benefit from, so that they can grow their families. Thank you so much.
Happy to help. Take care.
Take care. Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.